Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. Today is Friday, the 14th day of February in the year of our Lord 2025. Yes, this is Valentine's Day, but I speak not of love today, but of corruption. And not just any old corruption, but the kind that only the U.S. taxpayers can provide, with $50 billion per year of their hard earned money all laundered through an organization called the United States Agency for International Development. I'm going to call it USAID. I'm just going to say it that way, although it has nothing about aid in it, but that is easier than saying the letters out loud. So USAID was formed by an executive order of President John F. Kennedy in 1961. President Kennedy looked at the world and concluded that he might be able to spare the world from some of what President Eisenhower had gone through by just spreading some U.S. money around in countries to help their people instead of using that money to destabilize them and start eternal wars. That process has become known over the years as soft power. It seemed to work, too. At least it worked for the few years of his too short life. USAID built schools, hospitals, and roads across much of Africa. JFK became a revered figure there, especially revered in Africa, and you can still find hospitals and schools named after Kennedy across Africa. Once Kennedy was assassinated by a lone nut who was coincidentally also assassinated by a lone nut, things started to change at USAID. The agency evolved over time into nothing more than a $50 billion slush fund for the politically connected to connect their ideologies and inflict them on people across the world. The uncovering and correction of this corruption is being labeled by certain Democrat politicians and their media mouthpieces as a coup. But no, folks, it's not a coup. A coup is what your CIA and State Department, using USAID money, has been conducting against foreign countries for at least the last 50 years. Audits of USAID by the Dodge team, or the Department of Governmental Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, has revealed to the American people some of the previously unexplained but puzzling things they've endured since the death of JFK. The corruption in many departments of the federal government is so deep, so complete, that I, along with most taxpayers, have been shocked and amazed by it. Yes, indeed, who would not like to have a $50 billion slush fund to sprinkle across the globe to satisfy any dubious project abroad or at home as well? For more than 60 years now, USAID has served as a slush fund for corrupt foreign governments, NGOs with corrupt objectives, and most importantly, the charities of the ruling elite. Yes, the corrupt of the world enjoy their lifestyles while lecturing the American people about the vital importance of foreign aid. The revelations coming from the Dodge team help to explain why Donald Trump is hated. He's hated like no American has ever been hated in my memory. Until Trump started to change some things, the objective of USAID has apparently always been the same, no matter which administration or which party happened to sit in the White House. The servants of the global elite work hard to get their party elected, but they know nothing will really change no matter who wins. The agency's mission remains the same through each election. Move money around the world through all the right hands so that the donor class remains happy. Some of you may have wondered how so many Democrat politicians with little to no credentials come into the office with very modest net worths. Before you know it, they're multimillionaires. You may wonder as well how, despite being abandoned almost completely by the people, by the American people, mainstream media somehow manages to stay afloat, somehow manages to continue spouting out its pro-government propaganda year after year. Where did Bill and Hillary Clinton get $200 million? You may have wondered about that. Where did their daughter Chelsea get $84 million? Yes, folks, USAID has buried within it the clues to answer those questions. When confronted with the facts, those who feed at the taxpayer's trough just point to the myriad of cutouts they use, other in-betweens they use to launder the money so they can pretend no one stole it. They don't even care anymore how obvious their theft and corruption are. I don't want to pick on the Clintons, folks, because this isn't about them. But it is curious how contributions to their global charity dried up as soon as Hillary lost the 2016 election. Yet we know now, thanks to the Dodge team, that the agency funneled money into this, quote, global charity and called it development. We shouldn't forget about Dr. Anthony Fauci, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the lab at the University of North Carolina. Somehow, the foreign aid of the agency found its way into the pockets of Chinese scientists who were conducting gain-of-function research on an obscure virus. Could the agency's money? No, folks, no, it was your money. Could that help explain some of the global catastrophe that resulted from the agency's development money? Have you ever wondered how the nation's news organizations, from the New York Times to Politico to all the networks, managed to keep operating the same agenda despite losing hundreds of millions or collectively together billions of dollars? No consumer feedback and no election changed their agenda despite the losses. Well, now, thanks to Elon Musk's team, we know they are funded with your money. It's like the Soviet promise that they would sell us the rope we would use to hang ourselves, but it didn't take Russians to do it. Only our own political greed and our own lust for power. Donald Trump's second term thus far has been dedicated to cleaning up and reforming bureaucratic state that has confronted and confounded him every step of the way. Permanent Washington hates him like no one else, but the feeling, folks, seems to be mutual. From trumped up, if you'll pardon the pun, charges to baseless lawsuits, corrupt judges, corrupt juries, corrupt prosecutors. Finally, at least 2 assassination attempts. Nothing has stopped him so far. The interesting thing is that everything they have done has only made him stronger. With each baseless charge, each lawsuit, his poll numbers increased, and the assassination attempts sealed the deal. Democrats could not grasp the fact that only their most ardent members believed their lies, while the rest of the people respected his courage and his determination. Perhaps the Democrats listened to their own bought and paid for with our money news that was always so friendly to them, so uplifting for them. The most interesting thing I have gotten from the revelations about the agency have been that its global mission to promote, quote, global development was a complete and utter failure because it was never the actual agenda. The agenda poured millions, no, trillions, into the world's sewers over the decades. But the sewage is still there, folks. It's still more violent, more chaotic than ever. In fact, I will argue right now that the agency which steals your money and gives it away to its elite favored ones has made the world much worse. And the world now is starting to notice. I could go on all day with talk about what USAID has funded, much of it to promote the gay, lesbian, and transgender agenda around the world, but let me just give you a couple of recent examples when a country or a country's leader is not behaving according to the State Department and its enforcement arm, the CIA. Then quite often the decision is made to effect regime change in that country. Normally they would just buy off with USAID billions the goodwill of the existing leader. But believe it or not, some foreign leaders have the best interest of their own people in their minds ahead of money. You may or may not know, but my wife and I started a Christian mission in Romania dedicated to providing a good, safe home to the distressed homeless children of Bucharest, Romania. That mission has done amazing things without a single dollar of government money over the years, but I only mention it to explain why I generally stay up to date on Romanian politics and the state of the Romanian economy. That country has been turned into a giant NATO base as a bulwark against Russia, which causes vulnerability for the Romanian people and can in no way serve their best interests. Some Romanians screamed about this, so in their last election, a man who opposed continued Romanian support for military aid to Ukraine and the NATO bases in his country won the election. The man named Georgescu, always described by the media as, quote, far-right or ultra-nationalist, came from behind and won the first round of voting. The media had him fifth in the polls, but surprisingly, the media was wrong. When he won, that simply could not be tolerated, so a constitutional court overturned the election and left a very unpopular president in power. Now that USAID is out in the open, hopefully no more money is pouring into Romania, perhaps in the next upcoming election. The people can actually elect the person they want rather than the person selected by the ruling elite. It has now come to light that the U.S., through USAID, was pouring money into State Department efforts to get the appropriate leader for Romania. They always termed it, quote, judicial reform and helping to form a, quote, civil society. But it amounted to CIA regime change funding through USAID using your money. This is all very disappointing for the Romanian people who suffer under extreme inflation, lack of food, lack of power, rising costs for the essentials of life, but they have their NATO bases, which of course put them in harm's way. They see America as a shining light on the hill, so the vile corruption now coming to light about USAID has been difficult for them. Hopefully, some real development will happen now instead of just making them a target. It's difficult for people who think they have democracy only to learn that a foreign government selects their leaders for them. Bangladesh is another recent example of what a little, quote, development and civil society can do for a country. The U.S. once wanted to put a large military base in that small country to deter the Chinese from the Indian Ocean. Bangladesh is located on the eastern tip of India, has no visible need for a U.S. military base whatsoever. So the president of Bangladesh said no, he would not accept the base. The CIA, with USAID funding, went in and destabilized the country so that he was forced out and a more favorable leader could replace him. I have toned down what the whistleblower who reported the overthrow of the government of Bangladesh actually said about it. The same thing has happened across the world, from Ukraine and its resulting war with many dead and the destruction of that country to many nations across Africa. Countries are seeing what the Dodge team has reported. They're not happy about it, folks. The real damage is that countries who have very unpopular leaders sit and wonder. They must wonder how much of their unpopularity is funded by USAID. How many millions have been spent on regime change around the world, but also on advancing the LGBTQ agenda. Only those people who are willing to support and advance that agenda are allowed to receive USAID money and State Department / CIA assistance. I don't have to remind you of it. I know you've seen the list just like I have. Such things as a transgender opera in Colombia at $50,000, transgender comic book in Peru, $32,000, so on and so forth. The weird thing is that they've been doing the same thing here in America that they were doing around the world. Destabilize the government, fund the media, fund the censorship regime to keep dissenting voices off the internet so only one view was present, except that presented by alternative media, which they worked hard to silence. Why were the BLM rioters allowed to burn and loot, but the J6 protesters were arrested and imprisoned? You will find the answer in USAID funding, folks. Perhaps the worst use of taxpayer money ever in the history of this country was the $27 million of agency money given to George Soros for his prosecutor election fund. Yes, that's right. Your money paid for this man's crimes. Your money financed the destruction of your city by violent crime. Incredible, unthinkable, but it all happened. I've often wondered during my roughly 45 years as a lawyer why my professional organization, the American Bar Association, has been so consistently in the Democrat Party pocket. Well, now, thanks to Elon Musk, I know the answer. The ABA has been voicing strong opposition to cuts in USAID money, I suppose to pretend they think it really is aid. The statement by the ABA against the revelations of Dodge was described as blistering. But then so are the numbers of grants for this and that the ABA receives. So the ABA blasts the cuts to USAID, but the ABA, is the organization that gets millions from USAID. It might be easier, folks, if we just made a list of those who do not get agency money and have not been corrupted by its millions. Maybe we should stop thinking that we can convert the whole world into California if we just throw enough taxpayer money at it. Why do we continue to fund an agency that sows nothing but corruption around the world? Now that this has come to light, people are seeing it. They're outraged by it. Granted, $50 billion per year is just a drop in the bucket of what the U.S. government takes from us and wastes each year, but it is a start, at least a start on the road to reduction of the $2 trillion deficit we are now producing. Finally, folks, this story is evolving and getting worse each day. The Pentagon is just starting to be looked at, as you might expect. The view is terrible. It's a very painful thing to see your government as it really is for the first time in a very long time. But it has to be done if we are to find our way back. At least that's the way I see it, folks. Until next time, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.